Diep is peeling a banana in
I'm
town
looking
when
for
Mr.
Lee,
Hoan
about
asks
6 years
about
old,
Nai.
simple t-shirt and shorts.
The salon
Yes,
bell
she was
and his
just here a
clipped
minute ago.
ID
Head that
badge
way,
make it
20
real.
o'clock.
If he is connected, we lose the field deposit, the shop license, and our address stays exposed. I couldn't believe how fast James moves into protection mode. One land deal, one name, one warning tonight. Like and subscribe if you value safety built
The
on
highlighted
proof.
signature.
Diep sets a banana on a
land deal,
saucer and
one
wipes sap
name.
off her
Warning
thumb.
banner. Tonight.
Nui sits on the salon chair, sneakers tapping the footrest. The dog sits and ears up. Finish your snack, Diep says. I finish, Nai says. The salon owner
God.
nods at the fruit
I
bag.
know the address.
Ms. Diep, you bring good bananas. Eat, Diep says, splitting one and sliding it across. The bell rings. A man steps in with clean shoes and a pressed shirt. An ID badge rests on a clip near his pocket. He nods to the owner, then looks at Diep and Nai. I pass by and notice the salon, he says. The owner tightens her jaw. Mr. Hoan. Diep keeps her voice flat. Hello. Mr. Hoan's eyes move to Nai. Your child? My daughter, Diep says. Where do you live? Mr. Hoan asks. Nearby. Diep answers. Mr. Hoan nods once. Town changes fast. Diep folds the tissue. People keep busy. Mr. Hoan glances at the fruit. Hill fruits. I work there, Diep says. He steps back. No need to trouble you. I just look. He leaves. The bell rings again, then stops. The owner exhales and wipes a comb. He asks many questions. Who is he? Diep asks. District office, the owner says. He checks names and addresses. Diep zips the bag. No more details. Nai hops down. We go now? Home first, Diep says. Wash hands. On the street, Diep keeps Ni close by the wrist. Nai looks up. Why you squeeze? Nai asks. Because I want you near, Diep says. Okay, Ni says. At home, the stove crackles. Diep rinses dirt from her nails at the basin. Nai trails her with the stuffed orange tucked under her arm. Careful mode, Nai says. Good. Diep replies. Careful mode saves clothes. Diep dries her hands and pulls out her phone. We go look at land today, Diep says. Nai stares. Our land? A small field, Diep says, near water. They walk to the footpath outside town. An older woman waits with a woven bag and a scarf tied under her chin. You are Ms. Diep? The woman asks. Yes, Diep says. You sell the field. Come, the woman says. They reach a plot beside a narrow stream. Diep steps onto the soil and rubs it between her fingers. Sand falls in small grains. This drains, Diep says. Easy to pump, the woman says, pointing at the stream. Nai crouches and presses one finger into the dirt. Soft. 2 Diep watches her hand. What do we plant first? Potatoes? Nai says. Why? 2 Diep asks. Strong. Nai says. The older woman laughs. Child talks true. 2 Diep faces the woman. Price? 15 million, the woman says. Land title? 2 Diep asks. In my house, the woman says. Oh, original and copy. Paperwork clean? 2 Diep asks. Clean, the woman says. Deposit first, finish in 2 days. 2 Diep opens her purse and counts notes flat on her palm. She stops at 5 million and closes the purse. I put 5 today, 2 Diep says. 2 days, I bring the rest. You bring a witness, the woman says. My husband, 2 Diep says. And we write a note today. Why tugs 2 Diep's sleeve? Safe? 2 Diep looks down. Safe if papers match. At the woman's house, documents line up on a low table under a fan that clicks. 2 Diep raises her phone. I take photos. 2 Diep says. Take, the woman replies. 2 Diep photographs the title, the ID card, and the stamped tax paper. She writes a deposit note on lined paper. Sign and thumbprint, 2 Diep says. The woman signs and presses a red thumbprint. 2 Diep counts 5 million onto the table, corners aligned. Receipt, 2 Diep says. The woman writes one and pushes it over. It's 2 days. Outside. 2 Diep calls James. He answers on the second ring. Talk, James says. I find a half-acre near a stream. 2 Diep says, price 15 million. You see title? James asks. I photo everything, 2 Diep says. I deposit 5 with signed note and receipt. Good, James says. Send photos now. I also meet a man. 2 Diep adds, Mr. Hoan. What he ask? James asks. Address. 2 Diep says. About Nai, James speaks low. No details to strangers. I do that, 2 Diep says. Deposit only with proof. James says, if it is not written, it does not exist. I keep the paper, 2 Diep says. Come home early. I try, James says, and ends the call. In his office, James spreads shipment sheets across the table. A Woodside supervisor stands with a report folder tucked under his arm. Imports and inventory, the supervisor says. Go. James says. We lack 3 billion in import capital, the supervisor says. James taps the page once. First order stays small. How small? The supervisor asks. 20 tons, James says. Then 30, 2 batches. Records, the supervisor asks. Every step, James says. Every receipt, every truck note. The supervisor nods. Employee trip, June or July. 3 days. Families allowed. Budget limits. James says. Simple. The supervisor says. Detailed, James says. Respectful, no waste. Understood, the supervisor says. At dusk, James comes home. He washes his hands and watches Diep stack bowls and wipe the counter. Nai hums at the table, stuffed orange on her lap. The dog sleeps near the stove. You stay quiet, James says. A man enters the salon. Diep says, Mr. Hoan. He asks questions. What questions? James asks. Where we live. Diep says, about Nai. About hill fruits. James dries his hands. Anything else? He only looks. Diep says. Too careful. James nods once. I verify. Diep turns off the tap. You think it links to the old trail? I think it needs a check. James says. After Nai sleeps, I send one message to the investigator and wait for the reply, James says. He sets the last bowl on the rack. Diep folds the receipt. You text him now? Yes, James says. One name, no story? Nai shuffles in with the stuffed orange tucked under her arm. I sleepy. Bathroom, Diep says. Then bed. Nai nods and turns. The dog follows her, then returns to the stove mat and drops down. James flips his phone over. Send me the land photos. Diep opens her gallery. Title first. Zoom on the stamp, James says. Diep pinches the screen. Clear? James leans in. Date shows. Owner name shows. Diep swipes. ID card. Front and back? James asks. Both, Diep says. Receipt photo? James asks. Diep lifts the paper. I take it at her table. James nods. Good. You keep original? Diep sits. Mr. Hoan asks about Nai. Wait, what exactly? James asks. Your child? Diep says. Where we live. James's jaw tightens. You answer? Nearby. Diep says. Nothing more. Good, James says. No more personal answers. He types one message and sets the phone down between them. The phone buzzes. James lifts it at once. Diep leans forward. Read. James reads out loud. Name matches, district official line. Proceed carefully. Diep stills. So he is real. He looks real, James says. Real people still cause trouble. Diep presses her palms on the table. What do we do tonight? James stands. We close gaps. James walks to the front door and checks the deadbolt. Latch? He asks. Diep pulls the chain. Set. James steps to the window and tilts the curtain. Street clear. Diep says. I turn on the porch light. Keep it on all night, James says. Diep nods. And phone sound? On, James says. If the gate moves, we wake. Diep points to the small camera on the shelf. Battery? James taps the screen. Full. Diep says. I write his name in the notebook. The gate? Diep asks. Gate, lights, doors, James says, and no random stops with Nai. Diep nods. Salon visits end. James opens the drawer and pulls a small notebook. We list what he sees. Diep counts on her fingers. My face. Nai. Hill fruits bag. James writes. He hears Nai talk. Diep says. He does not get our address from me. Diep stands and walks to the cabinet. She opens the metal tin and slides the land papers inside under a rubber band. James says, "Key stays with you." Diep shuts the tin. "Key stays with me." Nee returns in pajamas. Hair damp. Story time? In bed. Diep says. Nye points at James's phone. "Daddy mad?" James crouches. "Daddy checks a name." "Bad man?" Nye asks. Diep cuts in. "We do not call people bad." James nods. "I do not know him." Nye frowns. "So why careful mode?" "Because we protect our home." Diep says. Nye hugs the stuffed orange tighter. "Okay, I sleep." James carries her to the bedroom and sets her on the mattress. "One story." Nye whispers. "Dog guard?" "He stays near the stove," James says. Nye closes her eyes. "Tell him." "I tell him," James says, and pulls the blanket up. Back in the kitchen, Diep pours hot water over tea leaves. She slides a cup to James. James does not sip yet. "We call Mr. Hung." Diep nods. "Call." James dials. "Mr. Hung" answers fast. "James, Mr. Hung says. "Night." "Sorry," James says. "A man appears today." "Mr. Hoan, district office." Mr. Hung pauses. He shows badge. "Clip badge," James says. He asks personal questions. Diep leans close to the phone. He asks where we live. Mr. Hung says, "You give address?" "No," Diep says. "Only nearby." "Good." Mr. Hung says, "Tomorrow, you keep witnesses. You keep cameras on." James asks, "Can you check if he holds a real post?" "Mr. Hung says, I ask quietly. I need full name." "I only have Hoan," James says. Mr. Hung replies. "Then photo his card next time. No debate," Diep says. "I avoid him," Mr. Hung answers. "You control your steps. He controls his," James says. "Land deposit also happens today. Papers photo already." Mr. Hung says, "Verify title stamp at the office." "I can go with you," James says. "Meet at Hill Fruits at 7. Mr. Hung says 7. "Bring copies." James ends the call and sets the phone down. Diep sips tea. "You move into structure fast." "I move into structure because it works," James says. Diep asks, "You think he comes again?" "I plan as if he can," James says. "That keeps us ready." Diep points at the tin box. "Paper stays locked," James nods, "and talk stays short." Diep taps the table once. "A tomorrow route?" James answers. "Shop, printer, Mr. Hung, title office, home." Diep says. "No salon." James opens his laptop and creates a folder. "Land stream field?" Diep watches. "Put receipt photo inside." James drags the file. "Done." Diep asks, "And Mr. Hoan?" James creates another folder. "Names, checks." Diep says, "Keep screenshots." James says, "Everything." He closes the laptop and turns off the main light. Leaving the stove lamp on, the kitchen falls quiet except for the wood crackle. Diep walks to the bedroom door and listens. Nee breathes slow. James checks the dog. He stays on the mat. Diep returns to the table and rests her fingers over James's wrist. "Sleep soon." James covers her hand. "We sleep. We wake early." They sit for one last minute with tea cooling, papers locked in the tin. and the deposit receipt copy tucked in the folder. Here's what gets me about this. 2Diep builds a future with receipts and clean questions. And one stranger still pushes for details. James answers with structure, not panic, and that keeps their home safe. Thanks for listening.